There are 15 high school students, eager to begin their first day at the prestigious Hope's Peak Academy. They each enter the school's halls anticipating their enrollment ceremony when suddenly, each of them experiences a bizarre blackout, all awakening to find themselves now imprisoned within the high school. Strangely, the exits have been blocked off, the windows bolted shut, and there are security cameras in each room watching their every move. There is no escape. As panic spreads throughout the teenagers, an eccentric stuffed bear makes his presence known, introducing himself as Monokuma, the school's headmaster, who proceeds to tell them that they're going to be trapped here for the rest of their lives. As mass confusion sets in, the bear continues, stating that the only means of freedom for a student is if they commit murder. They must kill one of their classmates and get away with it. I say this because if a murder does occur, a mock court trial will be held shortly after, in which the classmates must pass a majority vote on who they think did the dirty deed. If the students get it wrong and the killer remains undetected, they all die, and the killer can leave as promised. But if the classmates can figure out who done it, revealing the killer, the culprit will be brutally executed by the headmaster, and the students go back to their communal life where the killing game continues. If all of these students want to make it out alive, they must join together and uncover the truth as to why they became trapped in the school, how they can escape, and who exactly it is that's pulling the strings in this twisted game of death. This is the basic premise of one of my favorite video games, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. It remains one of the most compelling pitches for a game story that I've come across, and I think the game's execution on this premise is wildly entertaining. Because while initially these students agree to work together to escape, we'll soon realize that some of them were lying through their teeth, with far more sinister intentions in mind. The thought of immediate freedom, all too tempting for those who are getting desperate to leave. Meaning Hope's Peak Academy will become a proving ground where only the strongest will survive the worst of humanity and escape to see the outside world once again. But unfortunately, freedom isn't something all of these students will get to experience, as Danganronpa can be unforgiving in the way it kills off its established characters. And this misery simulator is more than happy to do it in some truly disturbing ways. So it's here where I want to warn you that Danganronpa and this video features some extremely graphic content. In fact, the game plays host to a multitude of issues that some may find problematic. So while we'll address the worst of it later, I want to quickly touch upon what's probably the biggest obstacle for newcomers right here. As I'm sure you've clocked onto, Danganronpa isn't a video game as much as it is a visual novel. A fact that admittedly almost made me pass over Danganronpa. I mean, prior to this game, not many genres had me running in the other direction quite like hearing that phrase. Honestly, I didn't entirely get the appeal. I figured if I wanted to read through hours of character dialogue and narration, I'd read a novel, and some of you might be thinking this same thing. However, giving this one a chance allowed me to experience one of the most engaging and unpredictable stories I've ever seen. So if you've never heard of or played it before, all I ask is that you give it a chance too. Because for all its problems, I think Danganronpa is so sincere in its message that it can't help but have heart. A genuine viewpoint which compelled me to make this video despite its imperfections. Meaning this video will largely be about why I adore this silly video game as I attempt to convince you to play it too. Because when Danganronpa is good, there's nothing quite like it. So to get into what it does differently and dare I say better compared to other detective, mystery and courtroom drama games, we'll have to first understand how its creator, Kazutaka Kodaka, injected this twisted vision of his with an unmistakable style and flair to create the Danganronpa we know today. I don't believe anyone else could have made Danganronpa other than Kazutaka Kodaka. A student of film, Kodaka had grown up adoring mystery movies and novels. Essentially, he loves a good fake-out or plot twist within a story. even citing Conker's Bad Fur Day as an influence when he was young and developing ideas, as he loved the concept of a seemingly cute and cuddly kids game only for its contents to be vulgar and shocking. So it wasn't long after until he decided to get into the games industry instead of pursuing film, believing he'd have more luck of getting his ideas produced. Eventually landing a job at Spike, he would soon develop a story idea based on the very same plot twists and shock factors that popularized the mystery novels, films, and games that he grew so fond of. Eventually pitching to the higher-ups on this idea, he presented them with the concept for a visual novel titled Distrust. Designed for the PSP, it was a high school detective mystery and would contain themes and story beats that drew inspiration from some of the most upsetting and disturbing media of all time. Looking at this early concept, it's easy to draw comparisons to films such as Battle Royale and Saw. And much like those films, the content pitched to be within Distrust was not for the faint of heart. And it was Kodaka's love of stories containing misery and mystery that was so palpable in each of these early design concepts. But being such a gruesome idea, there was immediate pushback from the higher-ups at Spike who deemed the concept to be far too graphic and therefore unmarketable, telling him that this bleak visual novel idea of his would barely sell any copies. And I think they had a point here. I mean, look at this early design of Monokuma and tell me that this isn't nightmare fuel that belongs in the deepest pits of hell. It would have been easy for Kodaka to lose hope here, to abandon his dream project for something more mainstream and suitable to what Spike were used to. But instead, Kodaka began working within these constraints to develop a new contemporary visual style for the game, which he titled Psychopop. Toned down was the realistic violent and bloody imagery, and in its place was a new trendy visual flair. The game's graphics leaning heavily into anime aesthetics, with the blood turned from crimson red into a hot pink. Finalized with the addition of some light game elements, all of these decisions were made to not only lower the age rating, but to add a stylistic pizzazz that would make it stand out from the sea of Japanese visual novels at the time. This new and improved version of Distrust, now renamed as Danganronpa. What hadn't changed, however, was the bleak misery still present under the game's new shiny coat of paint, as there's an attitude of hopelessness that permeates this game. A feeling of despair that's never more apparent than in its main story. Danganronpa begins with our main character Makoto starting his first day of school at the elite Hope's Peak Academy, a school that plays host to a multitude of exceptional talents known as Ultimates, individuals recognized as the undeniably best within their chosen field. Except for Makoto, his enrollment was seen as something of a surprise to him, because he doesn't exceed at anything. In fact, he's completely average in every facet of his life. He's only here because his enrollment was purely luck of the draw. It was his name that was randomly chosen amongst thousands of average applicants. Given the title of Ultimate Lucky Student, he knows deep down he doesn't have an actual ultimate ability, and thus he's given the ever-relatable character-defining trait of feeling inadequate amongst his peers. Meaning with no real skills, he's already disadvantaged when he soon finds himself trapped in the school alongside 14 other Ultimate students, where matters are only made worse for him when the gang is soon introduced to the series mascot and vessel of pure evil, Monokuma. After he details the killing game he wants to occur, there's a moment in which Makoto and the students realize the gravity of their situation. That together, within that gymnasium, each of them is completely alone, as the idea dawns on each of them that someone amongst them is potentially already plotting another's death. Given a limitless supply of food and water, and each provided with a private dorm, Makoto now has to navigate this tricky, indefinite living situation as each student has their guard up and their intentions hidden. The possibility of rebelling ruled out as Monokuma enforces strict regulations that the students must abide by. And with the punishment being certain death, the students realize they're well and truly trapped within this nightmare. A hellscape where things only get more complicated when Monokuma starts tempting Makoto and his peers with motives. Whether it be by threatening their friends and families in the outside world or with mountains of cash, suddenly the students that promise to work together to escape begin second-guessing the strength of their alliance. What I love most about this introduction is that it's where we get the first taste of what I think is Danganronpa's greatest strength, that being its excellent writing. The scenarios of escalating pressure are so detailed and layered that every character's interactions are captivating. Each line of dialogue is crafted to not only progress the plot with necessary exposition, but also gives insight into the characters and their feelings towards each other. Bookended by Makoto's internal dialogue, which acts as narration, the writing does a fantastic job of filling you in on the details of his thoughts and emotions. It would be enough for Danganronpa to merely present the character's dialogue for you to read, but it tries to go beyond that through Makoto to capture the feeling of the scenarios he's in. Whether it be detailing how someone is acting towards him, or the intricacies of their expression, or a quickly souring vibe in the room, the writing allows you to peer into the mind of someone within this extraordinary situation. But perhaps my favorite thing about the game's writing is its ability to subvert all of my expectations, because it's not long until a student cracks and a desperate murder occurs. The writing's ability to deceive and misdirect, meaning each body discovery is a complete surprise as to who it will be, who it was that killed them, and how they managed to do it. As Danganronpa always presents logical scenarios as to how the murders took place. The mysteries as to who done it are brilliantly thought out and are always intriguing as to how and why it occurred. So for an example, I'd like to use the premise for one of my favorite investigations in the game. There's a moment within the 4th chapter where another student has been found murdered, except they've been discovered in what is known as the classic locked room mystery. A locked room mystery is essentially the investigation of a murder that's taken place within a room that has no escape. Containing a locked door, no vents, and certainly no trapdoors, it would appear that the perpetrator has vanished in thin air. A concept made more puzzling in Danganronpa as the room possesses clear evidence of someone else having been there, but displaying no conceivable way that they could have left. A situation that only becomes more sinister as a suspect steps forward admitting to being the culprit, leading you to question what they would possibly have to gain from getting caught and being executed. It's a genuine head-scratcher as to how the murder could have occurred, let alone who it was that did it, and for what reasons they had for choosing the target they did. And I use this example because to me there's nothing more infuriating than when a game presents a puzzle, question, or twist that you can immediately call. An answer that you've figured out minutes or even hours of playtime before the characters have caught up to your logic. But here in Danganronpa, I had the feeling you're always in the dark as to what's really going on, as this specific mystery ended in a way that I found genuinely fascinating. Unfortunately, the game is filled with mysteries like this one where you're left constantly questioning the honesty of your fellow peers, as your classmates will use deliberately vague or distant dialogue to deflect your questions as you investigate. Which is what makes the class trials, the place where you must uncover the truth in the 11th hour, so entertaining. As the system it has you use to converse with the suspects and ultimately reveal the murderer is unlike anything I've ever seen before. If we were to compare these class trials with other courtroom drama games such as the Ace Attorney series, we'll notice they use the traditional judicial system, in which a single defendant must maintain their innocence against a non-biased prosecution who will ultimately decide their fate. Keep in mind, this series specifically is a satire on just how stacked the deck is against the defendant in the Japanese judicial system, but it's the principle here that I want to draw attention to. Because in Danganronpa, all sense of fairness and non-biased judgments are violently thrown out the window. Because here, the jury are the students, but the students are the suspects. So the people responsible for making the call of guilty or not guilty are also each acting as their own criminal defense lawyer within the case, one of which definitely did the murder. Meaning each has to prove their innocence through evidence and alibis while at the same time either trying to find the culprits or pin the blame on someone else. As I'm sure you've noticed, it's a system designed for shenanigans, as Monokuma acting as judge isn't interested in finding justice, he just wants someone to be prosecuted. Meaning there's ample opportunity for a multitude of red herrings and shocking plot twists as the trial unravels. And with the threat of death looming if they get it wrong, never has the jury been under more pressure to make the right call. So when Makoto tries to present his evidence to his classmates, it's not uncommon for the title of Suspect Number 1 to change hands once, twice, or even 3 times throughout a trial. The real culprit often remaining hidden until the final moments when someone makes the throwaway comment and is caught in a contradiction. And it's these moments within the labyrinth-like trial conversations that makes for some joyous moments of incredible banter. as I think they highlight the greatest asset to Danganronpa's writing, that being the game's unforgettable characters. The 14 students you're trapped with within Hope's Peak are all fleshed out in a way that feels like they could each be the main character of this game. With charismatic personalities and compelling backstories, the game is masterful at presenting you with a sliver of information about them that makes you want to get to know each of them better. And it's when you're talking with them during the story important scenes or just during the free time that the game occasionally offers you, where this subversion of expectations that I mentioned earlier is at its strongest. See, Danganronpa is a sneaky boy. Like, I'm talking in the early promotional screenshots for this game, we're shown a character in locations that they never actually get to see, because by that point in the story, when the area becomes available to visit, they're already dead. Before people even had the chance to lay hands on this game, it was already doing anything it could to deceive us. So much in the same way, at the beginning of the game, Danganronpa presents you with some intentionally tropey and stereotypical characters for you to quickly make a judgment on before the story progresses, only to then use the rest of the game to slowly reveal that these characters are much more than they initially seem, all having some kind of struggle, hidden agenda, or even masked personality that they're hiding. A truth that will change everything you think you know about them. And it's revealing these true identities after stripping away their masks as the story progresses that makes up some of Danganronpa's most unique and compelling moments. As watching how each acts within the sinister situation they're put in reveals a lot about who these people are and what they stand for, each reacting completely differently to the bizarre scenario playing out before you all. In reference to what I mentioned earlier with Danganronpa being a sneaky game, a large part of that is conveyed through these characters and with what information they're willing to reveal. Some are really intelligent and are quick to pick up on the truth behind what's happening in these increasingly disturbing scenarios far quicker than Makoto can, while others are completely hopeless and will contribute nothing to the class trials. So as a result, as life within this imprisonment continues, a social hierarchy develops, with the intellectually strongest at the top, meaning come class trial time, it will be these kinds of people who will be able to effectively get their ideas across to convince their classmates and push their agenda. So when another student is acting suspicious or distant, as if they've discovered some information that would make the investigation clearer, you feel compelled to talk to them. Because perhaps most interesting about these characters is the feeling of narrative weight they all possess, as there's a sense when playing Danganronpa that anyone is capable of anything, and that each classmate possesses equal power to shift this hierarchy into their favor. So when someone does take matters into their own hands, it always dramatically alters the course of the story. Often it's by committing an act of foul play, a murder by the hand of the classmate you would least expect. Danganronpa makes it horrifically apparent that with the right incentive, these students are capable of anything. And it's when our villain Monokuma repeatedly raises the stakes, where things turn from scary to downright dangerous. Arguably the most interesting character, the being responsible for the imprisonment of the students, Monokuma is the embodiment of despair. You would think a being of such evil should be an empty void, incapable of any emotion. But Monokuma revels in the pain and suffering of these students. There's an unwavering glee in his chirpy voice as he prompts these students to commit unspeakable acts of violence, drawing immense pleasure from the opportunity to execute a guilty student. What I find so compelling is that we don't know where he's from or why he's here, he just exists, here solely as a catalyst for chaos. The students can only assume he's animatronic, but there's something otherworldly about him in the way he can appear anywhere at any moment. And there's a moment early in the game that I'd like to talk about where Danganronpa conveys just how unstable he can be. It's the point in the story where the first student has died, and Monokuma now instructs the rest of the students to begin an investigation to gather evidence for the inevitable class trial. However, their innocent classmate's death coming as so sudden and shocking to them, one student refuses to participate. Adamant that they're not playing his game anymore, they step on the stuffed bear as an act of defiance. Only violence against the headmaster is against school regulations. The other students, fearing the worst, are left stunned as they witness dozens of spears materialize from thin air, as they mercilessly impale the rebellious student. Monokuma reminding the others that similar behavior will not be tolerated as the students helplessly watch their classmate lose an unrecoverable amount of blood. Wasting an innocent life to make an example for the other students, Monokuma leaves them to wonder just what exactly he is. I find Monokuma as a character to be a fascinating insight into the mind of Kidaka because, in a way, he represents what Danganronpa is. He's more than just the cute mascot on the cover of the game, he embodies so much of what makes Danganronpa great. As while he is evil incarnate, he's also consistently entertaining, largely due to his black humor and dramatic theatrical reactions. He's largely responsible for the tightrope walk this game achieves, combining an upsetting subject matter with goofy anime nonsense to create a game capable of running the full gamut of emotions. So with such a distinctive character representing despair, he becomes the vessel for one half of the game's major theme, that being the battle between despair and hope. The battle between the students and Monokuma proving to be a dynamic and escalating tussle of beliefs as the stakes become increasingly threatening. As a result, the feeling you experience while playing Danganronpa is that of extreme pressure, the kind of which I can't really compare to any other game I've played before. This game is relentless at escalating the stakes, and with any student's death comes further complications within the school. Monokuma constantly reminding you of just how irreversible this situation is for the students, your classmates continuing to turn on one another as they become increasingly distressed, while the real enemy, whoever's controlling Monokuma, if there even is someone controlling Monokuma, completely out of sight. A situation made even worse as there's constant unease in who you as the player can trust when walking through the school's surreal halls, despite Makoto's best intentions. And perhaps worst of all is the creeping suspicion if what you're experiencing as Makoto is even real. As a large part of experiencing this nightmare is the feeling that you're never really sure as to what's for certain. For example, there are clocks in the school, but there's no natural sunlight. You can't say for sure what time it is, with the genuine possibility of Monokuma just depriving you of a regular sleep schedule to increase paranoia. You're also drop-fed hints by Monokuma as to what's happening in the outside world, but it's also just his word. How can you trust anything he's telling you? And with surveillance cameras in every room watching your every move, there's a feeling that each action and conversation are all being watched and dissected by the mastermind at play. Meaning there's little chance Makoto can get away with developing a plan with the others to escape, much less get away with scribbling a willy on the whiteboard. Adding to the game's feeling of constant misery is how Danganronpa makes it clear there's no victories to be had when playing. This game just doesn't give you that satisfying feeling of accomplishment. When a killer is caught, it's rarely cause for celebration. Revealing them isn't satisfying, it's tragic. Their actions always occurring as a result of their desperation to escape. There's someone or something on the outside that they felt they had to return to, that they valued so much they figured it was worth taking a life for, which makes it so heartbreaking when you become aware of who did it and why. So it's here I want to talk about the game's soundtrack, as these kinds of upsetting moments are impactful in their own right, but I think they're made all the more effective through Danganronpa's use of music. Aiming to embody the psychopop aesthetic, the tracks are often reflective of how the students are feeling at any given moment. Examples being frantic and high-energy wailing guitar riffs over trendy electronic drum beats that epitomize the students' adrenaline, to haunting and echoing school chimes that remind you of just how alone you really are. And as enjoyable as these tunes are, it's in how and when they're used that has the music existing as one of Danganronpa's greatest strengths. Because it's when the tracks are combined with the visual novel format that creates a unique tone as Danganronpa relays its story. As in this game, the music can be triggered by your press of a button as you continue reading through the dialogue, meaning it can be timed to begin playing just as a character has finished their sentence, in which they might have added further complication to an already sticky situation, or in which they might have revealed their true nature, dropping a bombshell on the rest of the classmates. The music acting as a prompt to begin feeling panic or confusion or fear after reading what a character has to say. Used most effectively when they've just announced some world-shattering information.
What did you say?
Danganronpa's music remains one of the highlights of my experience with this series, and I've come to expect nothing less from this game's legendary composer, Masafumi Takada. For the uninitiated, this man is your new god. Whether it be No More Heroes, Vanquish, or his arrangements in the Super Smash Bros. Series, everything this man touches turns to gold. Please give him all your money. So at this point, I think it's pretty obvious I'm quite chuffed with Danganronpa. Earlier I called it one of my favourite games, and usually around this part in most of my videos, I'll quickly skim over the things I didn't like about the game. You know, some brief nitpicks before it gets swept under the rug as we make room for the adoration to continue. But I'd be lying if I said Danganronpa didn't have some genuine problems. Issues that I'd feel a bit icky about if left unaddressed. I feel obligated to emphasize just how heavy this subject matter is. Sure, it's dressed up differently, but it's still school children murdering each other within a school environment, and I'm sure you can think of what other real-world scenarios that concept is reminiscent of. So I'd avoid this if you're not okay with seeing content like that. And lastly, I haven't shown any of the bodies in this video primarily to avoid spoilers as to which classmates die, but as a general warning, my god, some of these kids get brutalized, so it's really up to you to decide where that line is. Personally, I couldn't help but connect with this game's heart. A message buried deep within this nightmare scenario that let me deem it okay to witness these characters experience such suffering, as I thought it made experiencing the heights towards the end of the game that much greater. So, with that in mind, I still consider Danganronpa to be a game that's absolutely worth your time. Changing the way I viewed visual novels entirely, it created an experience that I would consider unique and unforgettable. A narrative that stands as proof that looks can be deceiving. Despite the low production costs and minimal faith from his bosses, Kodaka had created an immediately recognizable and stylish game that's influences were clear. Upon release, not only had Danganronpa reached its expected sales numbers, but word of mouth meant it had exceeded them to become a cult hit. Danganronpa really was the little PSP game it could. One that had gone on to create a dynasty backed by its rabid cult following. Eventually receiving ports to PC and PS4 as the series gained in popularity here in the West. It went on to receive 2 sequels that I think both surpassed the original, as they would build upon what made this one so great, but of course I recommend starting here. It also received a spin-off third-person action shooter, and 2 anime adaptations as well, so if this is something you end up really clicking with, there's more than enough content out there to hold you over for a while. So hopefully in this video, I've been able to adequately explain the appeal of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc and why I adore it so dearly. I think it's an incredible story that I'm pleasantly surprised I was able to connect with, despite what I assumed would be a major obstacle for my enjoyment. It's a tale of overcoming struggle and despair through friendship and the perseverance of hope. One that wasn't afraid to be silly and annoying, only to then hit upon something real. Showing life at its lowest, plagued with anguish and suffering, so it could allow us to appreciate the joy and ecstasy of coming out the other side stronger for it. So I think it's really special to see a game like this exist. One that cultivated its own path, but was still a love letter to the mystery genre by a man whose creative flair is unbridled. Danganronpa is a testament to Kodaka's passion, and it was so encouraging to have seen his dream project evolve as it gained in popularity. I can't wait to see what this insane man has in store for us next, because I consider Danganronpa to be incredible. Hey folks, Paulie here. Just wanted to say thank you for watching the video, and for those wondering where the videos have been recently, I actually just took a trip to Japan, which was really cool. I got some footage and stuff. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but it was a really great time. And after that came, the holiday season, so I was off seeing friends and family, so that would explain the lengthy delay since the last video, but hopefully we're back to a more regular schedule of what was the usual, one video every month, kind of. We'll see how we go. If you'd like to stay updated in the future with what I'm doing and stuff like that, you can follow me on Twitter at SometimeSPaulie, and I don't really know how to end it from here, so I'll say thanks again, and see you in the next one.